My name's Tulkus. I am a knight with the Dominion of the Unconquered Sun, and I'm making a quick reference of my sword class for squires or anybody else interested in Boffer swordsmanship and can learn from any of the things that I was taught whenever I was coming up. First thing to keep in mind with what I'm about to say is the first and only real rule of swordsmanship is do what successful people are telling you to do until you know better, and then you can just do whatever works for you. So starting is your footwork. Whenever you have your dominant hand and dominant foot in front of you, that is a speed stance because your hand is in front of you and it's easier to make it be faster. If the dominant hand is behind you, that is a power stance because it is delivering whatever it is doing with more power. Whenever you switch from power stance to speed stance, like this, that is a passing step because the back foot or the front foot is passing the other foot. Whenever you have, whenever you don't have a pass, whenever your feet don't change position, and you step forward and you step back, staying in speed or power stance, that is a step. That is a standard step. Whenever you extend but don't move the back foot, that is a lunge. So just terminology to help with everything that we're going to be talking about moving forward. Terminology on a weapon that I'm going to be talking about, not of any of this is exclusive to Boffer or German longsword, but top half of the blade is the tip or the weak, bottom half of the blade is the forte or the strong, grip, pummel, quillions, or guard. I just say guard. Whenever you're deciding what weapon to use, different techniques are beneficial based on your grip. Whenever you have one-handed, this matters a lot less than two-handed, but the terminology for different grips within two-handed weapons, the closest is whenever you have your hand wrapping over the pommel. This is hand and a half. Bigger handle whenever you're used to fighting with gloves. The important part is that your offhand is on the pommel. Whenever you butt both hands together, that is arming. Whenever your hands rest between your hips, that is longsword. When your hands rest at the width of your shoulders, that is greatsword. And when your hand rests between your hip and your shoulder diagonally across, so that wide, that is a great weapon grip or a pole weapon grip. You can grip it here, you can use a glaive down here, that doesn't matter, but just for terminology's sake, this grip is a pole grip. This grip is a greatsword grip, width of your shoulders. Longsword grip is your wrists sit inside the points of your pelvis. That's your longsword grip. Arming is your hands are butted up. Hand and a half is when one half of the or part of the hand is on the pommel. So moving into guards. Guards are a combination of power or speed, determining which is in front, high, medium, or low, where the point resides, and offensive or defensive. Defensive is the weapon is in front of you. Offensive is the weapon is not directly defending your body from attack. So the most common starting sword stance in German longsword is called Flug. Flug is the stance of the plow. You could also think of this as speed, because my dominant hand is in front. Mid, because the sword is in the middle. Defensive, because the weapon is in front of me. This is a That's what flug guard is. Another guard that has all the same variables except for power and speed stance, I call it key stance. I don't know 100% sure what this guard is called, but it's the same thing except in speed stance. My non-dominant hand is forward. This is a weaker stance structurally, but allows you to reach out farther because you're reaching out from the bottom of the sword. So whenever your forward arm reaches full extension, you have the full length of the weapon versus only to the top of the hilt, up to the guard. So mid guards, defensive, flug, and key. The high guards are, all of the high offensive guards are called Vomtoog, from the roof. So this is the most common way of using Vomtoog. Vomtoog is an offensive stance. The sword is behind me. It is a high guard. And traditionally you're in power stance, dominant arm behind you. This is a great stance for throwing an initial step or throwing an initial swing. It can be a great transition from Vomtoog into flug. So you go from a very offensive guard to a very defensive guard while throwing a swing. And there's lots of variations to Vomtoog. So this is the most traditional Vomtoog. You can have an offside. I'm still in power stance, even though my body is kind of torqued over to the side because my non-dominant leg is in front. So this is another form of Vomtoog. It gives you that same swing, but on the opposite side. Up overhead, your shoulders are square though. So you kind of lose a bit of the profile. Not great for fighting incoming archers or spears or something like that, but very intimidating whenever you have reach advantage, for one. But that's Vomtoog. Vomtoog is also one of two luring stances, because you can rest at Vomtoog very comfortably, and it leaves you theoretically completely open. So, but your sword's ready to be thrown. It's not in a defensive position yet, but it is ready to be thrown at any point. So Vomtoog is one of the two threatening resting positions. The other threatening resting position is owlbear. Owlbear is the guard of the fool. Am I a fool for being in this guard because I'm not guarding shit, or are you a fool for thinking that you can attack me without me retaliating? So this is the guard of the fool. This is a comfortable stance to rest in. So that's why this one and Vomtoog are the threatening resting stances, because I can stay here all day long. I'm very comfortable, I'm very centered, I'm very easy to move and react. This is a very low energy exertion stance for me to wait for you in. To analyze this, owlbear is a speed stance because my dominant hand is in front, low defensive because my sword's in front of me. This is an alteration of owlbear. It's garbage. It's really only used in transition, but going over all of the different variations, it is a low offensive power or speed stance. Whenever you're low, you want to be in power stance because then you need the force to overcome your blade being low. So this stance exists. It's not very good. This stance is pseudo popularized from Eastern martial arts more. It's a variation of a drawing strike, but the body mechanics apply to this stance. So this is very similar to owlbear, but in power stance, the blade behind you. So this is an aggressive stance versus a defensive stance. The other variations on the main forms is the hanging and ox guard. So in hanging guard. So you kind of make your arms into a picture frame and you hang the sword in front of you. So that's hanging guard. Hanging guard is very structurally sound. This is good and bad. From here, you have the very good ability to thrust and parry and divert into an oncoming swing. But your wrist is already at about its max flexion rate. So if you're guarding here and you take an on-down hit, you can lose grip of your sword or hurt your wrist. So this is a great defensive stance for light attacks, but it can really hurt your wrists or you'll lose grip of your sword if you're in this stance defending yourself against a heavy attack. The opposite is ox guard. Your hands make horns. Ox guard is much better at absorbing a heavy attack. Your wrist is not even remotely at the extension of its deflection. So an oncoming swing from here, you have a lot of recoil to absorb that impact. You lose a little bit of range because from here, your hand, it's less comfortable to thrust out of this stance than it is from here. But ox is a very, very good stance to use if you're expecting a heavy swing, and you can use the recoil from that swing to charge up another attack. So one thing in German longsword, it's called the Meisterhau, and the Meisterhau is a defense and attack at the same time. So there's a Meisterhau that comes out of ox guard where you take a defensive swing that comes down on your sword, you block the swing, it swings your sword back behind you for you, and then you deliver a swing back down into Flug. So you start in ox, they knock you out of ox into Albert or into Vomtoog. You redirect the energy from their swing down into Flug, and you end in Flug either stuck into them or in a very stable defensive stance. The only other one that I can think of that's got a name for is Ling Point, which is at full extension. So it doesn't really matter if you're in speed or power, but this is just about maximum reach. This is a threatening position more than anything, deflecting oncoming stuff, or if you're working with somebody else, to be able to do stuff because your weapon's got another 2 foot in front of you or foot in front of you that you can't do from here, to give you benefit to other people that you're working with. But that is the German longsword forms and guards. The next thing is with sword and board, the A-frame. So I'm using a punch shield, and I'm using what would be typically considered a Saxon length longsword. Saxon length because I can swing it and it doesn't hit the ground. I can't remember. I think Italian length is the length of your arm. Saxon length is you can just nick the ground, and German length is you put your hand over your heart, so on this side, or no, on this side, and you're just barely able to wrap your fingers over the tip. So it's too short to be German length, German arm in length. But I'm using a Saxon sword because that's the one that I've had the most ability to not break recently. So A-frame, most of the time when you are fighting another right-handed fighter as a right-handed fighter, your primary threat is a high cross, so this angle, or an onside swing, so this angle. This guard takes care of both of those. Note that you can see my stomach. We'll get to that. But this guard protects the two most dangerous lines of attack. How you know your guard's in a right place is if you're sparring with somebody else or working with somebody else, you want them to be able to hit your sword. So they're going to be swinging across. So you want them to be able to hit your sword and it not hit you in the face. You want it to hit your shield. You want it forward enough that it hits your shield. And you want it out enough that they can't hit your forearm without an offside swing. So from here, there really shouldn't be any angle that they can deliver a swing this way that the blade doesn't cut off that angle of attack. Doesn't guard against wrap shots. Wrap shots are super valid in a way of fishing out of people in a good A-frame. But this is a great stance to be in whenever you're fighting somebody else that is left-handed, or if you have the mobility advantage, because it gives your feet open, and having nothing right there in front of your feet, old school preference, I don't want anything there if I'm moving fast. I don't care if I'm standing. So if you have the mobility advantage, or if you are trying to taking ground, you want the shield directly in front of you. So I'll go into that one in a minute. But if you've got the mobility advantage, or if you're fighting somebody else that is right-handed, this is the stance you want. The variation for this whenever you're fighting somebody that is right-handed while you are left-handed, or if you are fighting somebody else that is left-handed while you are right-handed, is suck this in, either drop the guard or raise the guard. So it's less efficient with the use of your shield because you have to bring the shield in closer. But if I'm left-handed, this is the best angle of attack for them. So a low swing to my midsection, where the typical A-frame has defenses from on high and across, it doesn't have anything from low on this side, on my sword side. So you have to compensate by that by putting this quadrant of the shield into that line of attack, protecting your power hip. Since your guard is in, you don't want to just commit farther out because then it's farther away for you to be able to reach. So you can either raise your sword to here, defending from their high cross, or suck it down in farther, lowering your grip really low, committing to blocking off that angle of attack with your sword. So traditional wisdom, the A-frame whenever you're fighting somebody, or the traditional shield stance whenever you're fighting somebody that is left-handed and you are right-handed, is square your shield with your opponent, lock the sword either perpendicular to the shield, keeping enough coverage so that they can't slot shot vertically down into your forearm, or horizontally, keeping your shield here ready to protect your forearm and your wrist, but you're defending your offside with the top portion of your weapon. And drills. That's A-frame basic shield work. The most powerful swings biomechanically for any right-handed fighter is serve the soup and dump the soup. You have a bowl of soup or a platter on your shoulder, and you slowly deliver it to whoever you are serving the dish to. Or you slowly dump it in their face. With a sword in your hand, you serve it to them, or you dump it in their face. So I'll do that again. Slow. It's always leading with the wrist until it's charged here. So you lead here and you serve. Or you're going to roll the wrist, start the wrist straight, then you roll it whenever you initiate the swing. You charge the swing and dump. serve the soup, dump the soup. And a good drill for anybody fighting with two swords, or a two-handed sword, is called winding. So you pick a target on your imaginary opponent, pick a piece on the wall or somebody that you're sparring with or whatever, put the point between your line of sight and whatever that target is, and then rotate into different guards while keeping the point as close to that as possible. Being able to switch guards comfortably while keeping point on is very, very useful whenever you're closing distance or changing targets in a situation. For example, if you're fighting on a line and you are in a nice heavy Vomtoog, you drop down and you hit somebody, you have killed them. Now your sword is at rest, you're in the middle of a line, and you need to be able to threaten somebody while defending yourself, and keeping that point on target while you transition wherever is a very good idea. Oh, the Great Triangles. So the Great Triangles is a concept for your footwork that you want to be transitioning between power stance and speed stance by taking where your feet are to where they will be, forming a triangle. So my foot was here. This is now a triangle. So if I'm going to step forward, that is the Great Triangle. If I want to step forward with my foot back here, that forms the Great Triangle. Whenever you step in the Great Triangle, your stance will be consistently strong and resistant to you being knocked over. This is not stepping in the Great Triangle. Whenever I was right here, none of my body mechanics was supporting that movement, as opposed to this, or as opposed to this. My body mechanics stay over the center of the triangle. Anyway, that is my sword class. Has been mostly the same as it's been taught to be by my knight and other knights and squires that I've had. So thank you for listening.